Hey, Josh of the Uncanny J-Man here. So there's this theory in Encanto that says that Mirabel did not get a power because she's being primed to replace Abuela. The idea here is that she is compassionate, she thinks first for the family all the time, and she's one of the only two people, her and Abuela, who talk to Casita. And so she did not get a power because Abuela doesn't have a power, because she is there to take care of everyone else. And Mirabel is being primed for that role. However, after a recent viewing of Encanto, I realized I think it might be something different. I think Mirabel actually did get a power that night at her ceremony, and that we've actually seen it happen on multiple occasions within the course of the movie. And I think she is not being primed to take over for Abuela, but to take over for her abuelo, her grandfather, Pedro. So the first thing I need to explain is the idea that Pedro, the magical family grandfather, is actually still alive in the casita. So we know that he sacrificed his life to protect his family, and in doing so, this miracle popped up. The candle became magical and quickly gave rise to the casita, this magical home that interacts with and is a part of the magical family. The thing is, we know that casita is playful, protective, gentle, and listens to Abuela when she gives it commands. We also know from the limited clips that we see of Pedro that he too is playful. He loves his family and protects them with his life. He's gentle with his newborn children, and he loves his partner. And when Pedro sees Abuela for the first time, he greets her with a casual wave. And what does Casita do once it is first formed? It gives Abuela a very similar wave. So in this role, living on in the casita, Pedro is able to continue watching over the family that he loves so much. And he's able to bestow this magical protection through these gifts that he can give to his children and his grandchildren. The thing is, there's a problem with this plan. He is able to protect them for now, but he knows even as a casita, even as a house, he will not be around forever. And he doesn't just want to protect his family now. He wants to protect them in perpetuity into the future. And to think that he's going to be around forever to do that is a fool's errand. He knows that's not true, especially when one of his daughters is constantly bringing up hurricanes.
What do you want from me?
If something were to happen to him, his family would not just lose their house. They would lose the powers that they have come to rely on, as those powers are tied directly into the casita. So when Mirabel turns 5 years old and it's time for her ceremony, well, from Pedro's point of view, this may be the last grandchild. Antonio is still 5 years away from being born, being 10 years younger than Mirabel. So this might be his last chance to do something different. His last chance to have some insurance policy, so that if something should happen to him, his family can continue on having these powers to protect them. And so with Mirabel, he has to do something a little differently. When Mirabel goes up to that door, he cannot give her one of the normal powers that he's given the rest. Something evident, something clear and straightforward like super strength or shape-shifting. He has to give her possibly the greatest power he's given yet. The ability to grant abilities. But he cannot tie this ability into the house like the rest. Everyone else, when they got their ability, they came with a door, a glowing door that showed what their power was. And inside was this magical room. This room that tied in with their abilities, that had a connection there. And in this way, their magical powers are tied directly to the house. But he couldn't do that with Mirabel, because he wants Mirabel to be available to grant abilities if something should happen to him. And if she is tied to the house as well, and something happens to the house, she loses this ability, and it's all for naught. And that is why she cannot have a magical room. And that is why the door disappears. Because her abilities have been granted by Casita, but then that link to the house itself has to be severed. Because when the Casita falls, Mirabel has to remain strong. Unfortunately, the disappearing of the door and that evident disconnect between Mirabel and the home, it's misinterpreted. People see this as a sign that Mirabel got no gift whatsoever, that she is powerless. And without feeling any different, and without a door to guide her, she never tries to bestow a power on someone else. She never tries to use her ability or figure out what it can do or what it does. At least not until many years later, when she starts investigating what's happening to Casita and investigating the magic. And she stumbles upon her sister Luisa and a confession that she feels overwhelmed, like she's under too much pressure from the ability that she gained. And how does Mirabel respond? She gives Luisa a big hug and says,
I think you're carrying way too much.
I think you're carrying way too much. At this moment, Mirabel is expressing how she feels about Luisa and her power. And in doing so, she is inadvertently taking some of Luisa's power away. Now there's this conflict between Luisa's power from Casita and her lack of power to help her slow down from Mirabel. And that is why Luisa is so much more affected by what's happening with Casita. Because she's not just impacted by the struggles Casita's having with the family falling apart, but she's also torn between the gifts bestowed by Casita and this desire for her to slow down that she receives from Mirabel. And then we see once more Mirabel enacting a power. When she then goes and talks to her other sister, Isabella, they get into an argument over Isabella's constant perfection. And they both agree that they wish Isabella could be less perfect all the time. And in that moment, Isabella's power changes. Up until this point, she's created flowers, and these beautiful flowers all over the place. That's what her power has been. But Mirabel brings forth a new power, the ability to create other plants, ones that are less perfect. And in this way, she creates this cactus, this lopsided cactus, that is part of her new abilities granted by Mirabel. And you could say, oh, she's never tried to make something imperfect before, and that's why it hasn't come up until now. But it's not just that it's different than what she's been able to achieve previously. When Casita does start to fall and people's powers start going away, all the flowers that has been created all disappear immediately. They vanish in a puff of smoke. But the cactus remains. In fact, after they rebuild Casita, we see them planting cactuses, including the one that she made right at that moment in front of the house. If the magic is tied to Casita, and the cactus came from that magic, why is it still around? I think that's a sign that this was different. The magic that created the cactus actually came from Mirabel enhancing the powers from Casita. And the last instance where she uses her ability in the movie, very clearly at the end of the movie, after they rebuild the home, this non-magical home, and then give the doorknob to Mirabel to put it into the house. She puts it in, and suddenly the house comes to life once more. Magic emanates from Mirabel and the doorknob, through the door, through the whole house, and it comes to life once more. The thing is, I don't think this is just the family's love coming back together, making Casita. I think it's also Mirabel being able to bestow that magic back to the house. She is now a source of that magic. And her ability, not being tied to the house as it was, can now grant life back to the new house that they have built. And the whole instance is different than when Pedro gave the powers to his children and grandchildren before. Before, the house already had a door ready, this glowing door of magic, and the doorknob was already a part of it. The magic very clearly came from the door and the house, through the doorknob, and into his children and grandchildren to grant them their powers. But this time, the doorknob does not come from Casita. It comes from Mirabel. She puts the doorknob in, and then the magic comes from Mirabel through the doorknob and into Casita. Encanto is an amazing movie. It leaves just enough open-ended to allow for theorizing and trying to guess what is happening behind the scenes. And this is my theory for you today. So let me know what you think of this theory in the comments down below. And also, if you could have one of the magical family powers, which would you choose? Personally, I think I'm leaning more towards the healing food type. I just love the idea that my cooking would actually be enjoyed by people for once. But let me know what you think, both of the theory and which power you would prefer. And thank you for watching.